Hans Christian Andersen was born on April 2, 1805, in a small town in Denmark. He came from a poor family. His father was a shoemaker, and his mother worked hard to take care of him. They did not have much money, but Hans had a big dream. He wanted to be a writer and tell stories to the world. When Hans was a young boy, he loved to listen to stories. His mother often told him stories about fairies, magic, and faraway lands. Hans enjoyed these stories so much that he wanted to make up his own. He would sit by the fire at night, dreaming up adventures and wonderful tales. Even though his family did not have many books, Hans read everything he could find. His imagination grew stronger with every story he heard and read. When Hans was 14, he decided to leave his home and move to Copenhagen, the capital of Denmark. He wanted to become an actor or a writer. It was a brave decision, but it was also very hard. Hans did not have any money, and he did not know anyone in the big city. He lived in small, cheap rooms and often went hungry. But he never gave up on his dream. In Copenhagen, Hans tried to become an actor. He went to a theater and auditioned for parts in plays, but he was not very successful. However, while he was there, something important happened. He met some people who helped him with his writing. One of these people was a famous writer named Jonas Collin. Jonas liked Hans' writing and promised to help him. With Jonas's support, Hans was able to attend a school where he could study writing and literature. He worked very hard and learned a lot. After a few years, he wrote his first book. It was a story about his own life, and it was called The Fairy Tale of My Life. It was not a very famous book, but it showed the world that Hans had talent. As Hans grew older, he became better and better at writing. He wrote poems, plays, and stories. Some of his stories were funny, while others were sad. But no matter what type of story he wrote, Hans always tried to make them interesting and magical. He wanted to take people to a different world, a world of imagination and wonder. One day, Hans thought of a new kind of story. Instead of writing about real life, he decided to create fairy tales. These stories were full of magic, strange creatures, and wonderful adventures. Hans wanted to tell stories that would make children and adults dream. So, he began to write fairy tales, and he wrote many of them. One of his first famous fairy tales was called The Little Mermaid. It was the story of a mermaid who loved a human prince. She wanted to become human to be with him, but it was a very difficult decision. She had to give up her voice and her life in the sea. The story was both sad and beautiful, and it made people think about love, sacrifice, and happiness. Many years later, the story was made into a famous Disney movie. Hans continued to write fairy tales that became beloved by people all around the world. One of his most famous tales is The Ugly Duckling. This story is about a duckling who is not pretty like the other birds. He is lonely and sad, but one day he grows into a beautiful swan. The story teaches people that true beauty comes from within, and that we should never judge others by their appearance. Another well-known story by Hans Christian Andersen is The Emperor's New Clothes. It is about a king who is tricked by two dishonest weavers. They tell the king that they can make him beautiful clothes that only wise people can see. In the end, the king walks through the streets in his new clothes, and everyone pretends to see them, even though he is wearing nothing. But a child speaks the truth and says that the emperor is not wearing any clothes at all. This story teaches people the importance of honesty and not believing in things just because everyone else says they are true. Hans Christian Andersen wrote many other stories that people still read today, such as The Princess and the Pea, The Snow Queen, Thumbelina, and The Nightingale. These stories are loved because they are full of imagination, creativity, and important life lessons. Hans was a master of making simple things feel magical. Although Hans Christian Andersen wrote many stories for children, his works are loved by adults too. People admire the way he could take ordinary situations and turn them into something extraordinary. He used his stories to talk about important themes like kindness, courage, love, and the importance of staying true to oneself. But being a famous writer did not make Hans Christian Andersen rich. He lived a simple life and often traveled to different countries. He visited many places, including England, France, and Germany, and he became friends with many famous people. He loved to walk around the streets of Copenhagen, looking for inspiration for new stories. Even though he traveled a lot, he always returned to Denmark, the country he loved. Hans never married, and he spent most of his life alone. Some people think that he may have been lonely because he never found true love. He wrote many stories about love and romance, but he did not have these experiences in his own life. Still, Hans was happy with his writing. He knew that his stories would live on long after he was gone. In his later years, Hans Christian Andersen became very famous. He was invited to many royal courts and met kings and queens. He was even given special honors for his writing. People from all over the world came to see him and thank him for his wonderful stories. Hans was proud of his work, but he remained humble. He always said that he was just a simple man who liked to tell stories. Sadly, Hans Christian Andersen passed away on August 4, 1875, at the age of 70. He had written hundreds of stories, poems, and plays during his lifetime. His fairy tales became famous around the world, and they continue to be read by people of all ages. Today, we remember Hans as one of the greatest writers of fairy tales in history. Even though he lived a long time ago, Hans Christian Andersen's stories are still important. They teach us lessons about kindness, love, and the power of dreams. His stories remind us that no matter who we are or where we come from, we can all be part of something magical. Hans Christian Andersen's imagination lives on in his tales, and his stories will continue to inspire people for generations to come.